Hello everyone, this video is on single image HDR reconstruction using a convolutional neural network with masked features and perceptual loss by Marcel Santana Santos. As a photographer or filmmaker, or basically just an end user, we face certain technical limitations such as being exposed to the highlights, we miss information about the shadows, and being exposed to the shadows, we miss information about the highlights. And this due to the fact that most digital cameras are able to capture a limited range of the real world's scene's luminance, and this thereby produces images with saturated pixels. Now the question is, how can we capture a single image in a way that we have both information about the highlights and the shadows? A very popular approach to generating HDR images is by combining a set of low dynamic range images of a particular scene at different exposures, which is basically called exposure bracketing. Now, the problem with this approach is the fact that it is very sensitive to hand movement. This means that the scene must be static and the camera must not move, obviously, which is a pain in the ass because no one wants to be carrying a tripod everywhere. What we really want is to be able to take an image with our mobile phones and then convert it to a HDR image. And that's exactly the purpose of this paper. This paper proposed a learning-based technique to reconstruct HDR images by recovering the missing information in the saturated area of the low dynamic range image. This was achieved by using a convolutional neural network that takes in as input the low dynamic range image and estimates the missing HDR information in the bright regions of the image. The final HDR image is computed by compositing the well-exposed content of the input image and the output of the network in the saturated areas. From the equation, T is the input LDR image, and Y is the output of the network in the log domain. M is a predefined softmax gotten by applying a nonlinear function to the LDR image. From the diagram, 1 indicates that the pixel is well exposed, while 0 is assigned to pixels that are fully saturated. The proposed steps that the authors used in achieving the high dynamic range image include a feature masking mechanism to avoid relying on the invalid information in the saturated regions, the use of a VGG-based perpetual loss function for the HDR reconstruction task, pre-training the network on in-painting before fine-tuning it on HDR generation, and finally, identification of textured HDR areas to improve the performance of training. For the feature masking mechanism, the idea is gotten from the fact that convolutional layers apply the same filter across the entire image in order to extract useful information. This makes sense for popular problems like style transfer, image super-resolution, or even image classification, and that's because every part of the image contains useful information. However, in this problem, the input low dynamic range images contain invalid information in the saturated regions, and using such information during training would lead to visible artifacts. What this mechanism does is to reduce the magnitude of the features from the invalid content by multiplying the feature maps in each layer by the softmask we spoke about earlier, where X subscript L is the feature map of the layer L and M subscript L is the mask of that layer. This basically means that at layer L equals to 1, we have X to be our input LDR image and M to be the input mask. Also note that since the mask is a softmax, weak signals in the saturated areas are not discarded. I'm sure the question you're asking now is, do they apply the same mask to each downsampled feature maps? Well, the answer is no. The mask was simply computed by applying the same convolutional filter for the features to the mask at the previous layer. This makes sense since the features are computed by applying a series of convolutional filters. The same filters can be used to compute the contribution of each valid pixels. The loss function used in this paper is a combination of an HDR reconstruction loss, LR, and a perceptual loss, LP. The reconstruction loss is a simple pixel-wise L1 distance between the outputs and the ground truth images in the saturated areas. Since the HDR image could potentially have large values, the loss is defined in the logarithmic scale. On the other hand, the perpetual loss is a combination of the VGG and style loss function, which has been used in popular papers such as style transfer and image in painting. The VGG loss function LV evaluates how well the features of the reconstructed image matches with the features extracted from the ground truth. This helps the model produce textures that are perceptually similar to the ground truth. The style loss ensures that the style of the reconstructed image is similar to that of the ground truth by capturing the style and comparing global statistics with the ground matrix. Due to the difficulties in getting large HDR images for training, the authors first pre-trained their network on image painting task by leveraging the large available datasets. This makes the model capable of synthesizing visually pleasing textures. The network was then fine-tuned on the available HDR images. One major problem is the fact that majority of the bright regions in the HDR training examples were smooth and textureless. Now, the issue with this is the fact that during fine-tuning, the network adapts to these patches and therefore results in difficulties producing textured results. In order to select the patches with textures in the saturated areas, they computed a score for each patch and then selected the patches that were above a specified threshold. The architecture used was a unit architecture with a feature masking strategy in all the convolutional layers, and then upsample the features in the decoder using nearest neighbors. Leaky rel activation function was used in all the encoder layers, while relu was used in all the decoder layers, except the last one, which has a linear activation function. For the image painting step, the MIT places dataset was used due to its large number of scenes with different textures, while for the HDR step, 2000 HDR images were collected from HDR images and videos. For each HDR image, 250 random patches of size 512 by 512 were extracted to generate the input LDR patches by simulating a virtual camera that captures random regions of the HDR scene. Once these patches are generated, a subset of these patches were selected using a patch selection strategy. That's it for an overview of the proposed steps. Now we're just going to look at some of the results from the paper. From the table, we can see that this method outperformed other similar learning-based single-image HDR reconstruction approaches in terms of both mean squared error and HDR VDP2, which is a visual metric that compares a pair of images. This set of images show how this method compared to similar methods on synthetic scenes. A very noticeable improvement is the reduced visible artifacts in low-light images. When compared on images captured by a standard camera, this method was able to synthesize artifact-free images compared to the other methods. The masking and pre-training method proposed by this paper outperforms other methods in terms of mean square error and HDR VDP2, where SConv, GConv, IMask, and FMask refer to standard convolution, gated convolution, input image masking, and full feature masking. Single image HDR reconstruction is a very challenging task. Although this method does a very amazing job in recovering complex textures, there are certain cases where this method fails to recover all the details. In this example, this method fails to reconstruct the wrinkles on the curtain, although I would say it's not that bad compared to other methods. Also notice that the network reconstructed the building in the third image with an incorrect color. This could be due to the fact that trees and skies are usually next to each other in the training data. Thanks for watching.